Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jovi. So, my only goal here is to help you to provide you knowledge about the history. And right now, we are in the Spanish colonial period in the Philippine history. So, I already provided the pre colonial history in the Philippines. So, if you have some time, you can check it on my YouTube channel, Digital Let Reviewer. I already provided um, some of the information, some of the materials all about the pre-colonial period in the Philippine history. And also, I already provided part one of the Spanish colonial period in the Philippine history questionnaire, and I also provided generalization. So you can feel free to check on my YouTube channel. And yeah, today we are now in the summary discussion. So before we proceed to sorry. By the way, sorry. Past week, I can able to make this a video. I can able to make discussions with regards for our topic. It's because my voice is not giving. So I have cough. I have a hoarse voice to be exact. So, yeah, so walang makapipigil. So, patuloy po tayong magbibigay ng kaalaman, free knowledge, free questionnaire, free discussions sa LET exam. So, my only goal here is to help you guys to provide some knowledge. So, please don't forget to like and subscribe to support my channel. For me, na mas maganahan pa na mag-provide og mga materials. Siyempre, that's one of my motivations. So, again, yung suporta, okay? So, without further ado, let us start. By the way, guys, we'll be discussing. So, in the Spanish colonial period in the Philippine history, so we'll be discussing first is the arrival and early contact, which is year 1521 up until 1565. So, guys, this is a summary, okay? So, summary lang ni siya. So, second, we have establishment of colonial period or colonial rule during 1565 to 1700s, and then religious conversion and cultural transformations, resistance and revolts, the Gallian trade and global connection, rise of Filipino identity and reform movements, 1800s, Philippine Revolution and Spanish rule, which is year 1896 and 1898, and then a legacy of the Spanish era. So first, we will be discussing the arrival and early contact, which is the year 1521 and 1521 and 1565. Okay, so 1521, which is the arrival of Magellan. So Ferdinand Magellan sailing from Spain and landed in Homonhon, Eastern Samar. So si Magellan nagland siya first sa Homonhon, Eastern Samar. So this marked the first recorded contact between Europeans and the Filipinos, which is year 1521. His arrival introduced Western influence and began a new chapter in the Philippine history. So sa wala pa niabot si Magellan, there's already um a governance, a sort of justice in the Philippines. There's already a writing system which is in the pre-colonial history of the Philippines. So kung gusto mo maka-learn ana, paki-check sa aking channel, which is I provided the pre-colonial summary discussion. Okay? So feel free to check it on my channel. So next, after Magellan landed in the Homonhon, Eastern Samar, so there's a battle happens in Mactan, and Magellan was killed by Lapu-Lapu, which is Lapu-Lapu is a local chieftain in Cebu. Okay, and this event is remembered as the first act of Filipino resistance against foreign invaders. Okay, so the Battle of Mactan, that is the first Filipino resistance against foreign invader. Lapu-Lapu is celebrated as national hero. Actually, there's no such evidence na si Lapu-Lapu jud mismo ang nakapatay ni Magellan. However, Magellan was killed during the reign of Lapu-Lapu. Okay? And next, 1565, this is the start of colonization. Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrived in the Philippines and established the first permanent Spanish settlement in Cebu. Okay? So pag-abot ni Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, na-establish siya ang nag-establish sa first permanent Spanish settlement which is happened in Cebu. So this marked the official beginning of the Spanish colonization, leading to centuries of foreign rule. Okay? So murag taas-taas ni siya nga pag-rule sa mga Spanish sa Philippines. And now the establishment of colonial rule, which is year 1565 to 1700s. So, establishment of colonial rule. So, after Legazpi's arrival in 1565, Spain began formal governance in the Philippines. So, pag abot ni Legazpi sa Philippines, during 1565, nagbuo sila og formal governance sa Philippines. And the country was divided into, which is first is pueblos, which is the town, and the provincias, which is the provinces. Okay, pueblos and provinces. So pueblos, that is the town, and provincias, that is provinces. Local leader called Gobernador Cilios. Okay, ang local nga mga leader, ginatawag sila as Gobernador Cilios, which is they're the one who manage the town, while alcalde mayor governed provinces. So the local leaders, which is the Gobernador Cilios, they are the one who manage the town, and the one who manage the provinces is the mayor, which is the alcalde mayor. Okay, 'di ba ang Philippines was divided into two, which is pueblos and provincias. So ang town or ang pueblos, ang nagamanage ana is ang mga gobernadorcillos, and then ang provinces ang nagmanage ana, which is the alcalde mayor. So at the top was the Governor General, representing the Spanish king. So we have Gobernador Cilias, we have Alcalde Mayor, and the uppers at top is the Governor General. They are the one representing the Spanish king. So Spain implemented the encomienda system, which is granting land and tribute rights to Spanish officials. So again, encomienda system, encomienda, this is the one the Spanish official was granted to have a land, okay? And then Filipinos were subjected to polo e servicio, which is the forced labor for males age 16 to 60 years old. And then often for public works like road and churches. So 6 years of the male child that can able to serve in the polo e servicios age 16 years old, from 16 years old up until 60 years old. So Filipino was forced to build churches, road, and other infrastructure without payment, and that is called polo e servicio, which is forced labor. Okay, and then mauni siya ang polo e servicio. So this is like imagination. Okay, so forced labor without payment. So naay pag mag-edad na ang mga bata og 16 years old, kailangan sila mag-serve, magtrabaho sa probensya sa town, and the probinsya na walay bayad. Okay, this is the reimagined about the polo e servicio. So we have a centralized power, which is it has a local impact. So before colonization, Filipinos live in independent barangays, which is led by datus with communal decision making and kinship based leadership. However, under the Spanish rule, the archipelago was reorganized into pueblos and provincias, which is the province. And this was governed by Gobernador Silis and Alcalde Mayor, and under the authority of Governor General. So way back before of the Spanish era, many Filipinos lost self-governance. And yet some local leaders became bridges mediating between local demands and community needs, preserving dignity where possible. Okay? So during sa pre-colonial, ang mga Filipino, they have a self-governance. They have already established a self-governance. Okay, they have a dato as a leader, and they have form of justice. However, when the Spanish arrive, nawala to siya nga um governance sa Philippines because napulihan sila o they're under the Spanish rule, okay? And the Philippine was divided into two, which is the town, that is the pueblos, and the province, and that is provincia, okay? So second, the encomienda system, which is the land, labor, and laws. It is because during the Spanish official granted encomiendas right to collect tribute, okay, from Filipinos in exchange for protection and religious instruction. However, in practice, it often led to abuse and overtaxation and displacement. Okay, so that's why it is land, labor, and laws. Okay, the Spanish government or officials they will be having rights to have a land in exchange for protection and religious instruction. However, in practice, that is lead to abuse, overtaxation, and displacement. So while infrastructure grew, resentment deepened. So while nagadaghan ang infrastructure sa road, churches, and other infrastructure due to the Pulo Servicio, so ang mga Filipino develop resentment. It is because given the servicio, which is forced labor from age 16 to 60 years old, na dito ang sapilitang pagtatrabaho. So this system planted seeds of resistance and awakened a collective longing for freedom. So due to that happenings, due to the Pulo Reservation, dito nabuo ang nagkaroon ng resistance, and then na-awakened ang mga Filipino to have a hunger for this is the cost of progress. Again, this is age 16 to 60 years old male. Filipinos male were forced to render 40 days of unpaid labor annually for public works like roads, churches, and bridges. Okay? And exemptions were rare and often required payment or influence. So, dalang lang na magkaroon ng exemption ang mga Filipino. And then, kung naa may exemption, kailangan sila magbayad. So, in the context of forced labor, the legal framework in the Philippines emphasizes the prohibition of such practices. So, first is the penalties for forced labor. Kung dili sila magtrabaho, naa sila'y penalties, which is individuals found to be involved in forced labor can face severe penalties. So during the Spanish colonial period, the Pulo Servicio was a system of forced labor that required Filipino men age again 16 to 60 years old to perform various public works for Spanish government. Exemptions, this is for wealthy Filipinos could pay a daily fine of fala. So the exemptions for Pulo Servicio, which is this is for wealthy Filipinos, could pay a daily fine called falya or fala to be exempt from this labor obligation. So ang code sa exemption pagbayad is falya or fala. Additionally, certain local officials and school teachers were exempt from the Pulo Servicio due to their services. So ang ma-exempt lang is a wealthy Filipino that could able to pay the falya, and also the certain local officials and school teachers. Ma-exempt sila, it is because they have to serve and Spanish as well. Napod sila yung mga serbisyo serbisyo sa local governance. And the forms of exemption is exemption include individual based on the age of 60 years old. Okay? Dito ka ma-exempt pag mag-age na ka sa 60 years old and above. And then, and social status such as principalia or the town aristocracy. And then the impact of the Polo Reservation was a critical component of Spanish colonial administration, which is aimed at exploiting native labor for the benefit of the colonial government and the Catholic Church. So this system had significant economic and social implications, contributing to demographic shifts and resistance among Filipinos. So um the exemption of that is if the Filipino can able to pay the cost, which is called falia. So that is the exemption cost of servicio is around 7 pesos annually, and that is very kanang mahal na gyud siya before, so ang maka-afford lang ana ang katong mga wealthy family. So during the Spanish era, the follow was exemption fee that wealthy Filipinos could pay to avoid forced labor. So ang faladar is cost today as 7 pesos, and it will be paid annually during the Spanish period in the Philippines. Okay, so this fee was typically around 7 pesos annually, allowing them to avoid the hardships associated with the Polo Servicio system, which was a forced labor system that required many Filipinos to work for the Spanish colonial government. However, the majority of the population could not afford this fee, leading to widespread resentment and resistance against the oppressive system. The Fala system significantly impacted the social structure of Filipino society, as those who could pay it were able to escape the harsh realities of forced labor, while the poor and working classes were burdened with the economic burden of the system. So, ma-exempt lang ang Filipino if they could able to pay 7 pesos annually. Okay, so the code of the exemption or the payment is the FALIA. And going back, again, so ang ma-exempt lang sa Pulo e Servicio is the wealthy Filipino family that they could able to pay 7 pesos annually, and also for the katong mga barangay officials and the school teachers. It's because they also serve in the Spanish government. Now we are down to religious conversion and cultural transformation. Okay, so the first printed book in the Philippines is the Doctrina Christiana. Okay, this is used to teach Christian doctrine. Indigenous scripts like Baybayin were gradually replaced by the Roman alphabet, reshaping Filipino literacy and identity. So, during the pre-colonial period, the writing system is the Baybayin. However, pag abot sa Spanish, it was replaced in Roman alphabet. Okay? Religious na kanang i-change god ang pananampalataya sa mga Filipino into Roman Catholicism, and they are sole believer of the animism or anito system. Okay, and then the core themes of the revolt is for spiritual defense. So Tamblot led a rebellion against Spanish friars who were aggressively converting locals to Catholicism. He rallied Boholanos to reject Christianity and return to their ancestral faith, centered nature spirits, which is diwata, and ritual practices. Second reason is cultural sovereignty. The revolt was a stand against the erasure of the native traditions. Tamblot claimed that a diwata had promised divine protection and prosperity if the people built a shrine and rejected Spanish religion and authority. So Tamblot was a sole believer of diwata, which is a need to belief system. Okay? So, third reason is the armed resistance. This is inspired by Tamblot's visions. Thousands of Boholanos rose up. So, daghan pod na katawhan sa Bohol ang nanindigan kay Tamblot. They attacked Spanish missions and reductions, for which is the forced resettlement. Forced settlements. The Spanish, led by Don Juan de Alcarazo from Cebu, eventually crushed the revolt after fierce fighting in Bohol's mountain terrains. So, si Juan de Alcarazo, he was the one who crushed the revolt after the fierce fighting in Bohol's mountainous terrain. Okay, so kumbaga napuksa ang revolt sa Tamblot resistance, a revolt was crushed by Juan de Alcarazo after the fierce fighting in Bohol's mountainous terrain. That Ilocanos be allowed and religious interference. He wanted civil and religious leadership to be transferred to capable locals. So gusto ni Diego Silang that the Philippines will be led by Filipinos. And the second reason is the alliance with the British. Okay, during British occupation in Manila, which is year 1762, 62, forces. He allied with British forces, hoping they would support his vision of an independent Ilocano state. The British recognized him as a governor of Ilocos, which is a symbolic but powerful gesture. Their story, Filipino led Ilocos. Okay, his word was sharp, but his vision was sharper. Next, we have the Francisco de Gojoy Revolt, which is it was happened in Bohol, year 1744 to 1829, and this was the longest revolt in the Philippine history because it lasted 85 years old. 85 years. Who was Francisco de Gojoy? So he was born Francisco Sindrijas. De Gojoy was a cabeza de barangay or barangay captain in Inabanga, Bohol. His leadership wasn't forged in ambition. It was born from grief, injustice, and a deep sense of duty to his people. And the reason for the Gojoy's revolt, first is a brother denied burial. Okay, this is the first reason for a rebellion of the Gojoy. A brother denied burial. So the Gojoy's brother, which is Sagarino, died in a duel while serving the church. The Jesuit priest refused him as a Christian burial, citing church law. This denial of dignity and spiritual rights ignited the Gojoy's fury, not just against the priest, but against the entire local system that allowed such cruelty. Second is a call to arms. So on January 24, 1744, Dagohoy and his followers assassinated Father Giuseppe Lamberti, the Jesuit curate of Jagna. This marked the beginning of a revolt. This marked the beginning of the revolt that would span 85 years, outlasting multiple Spanish governors and military campaigns. And the core themes of the Gojoy revolt or the Gojoy rebellion. So first is community-led resistance. The Gojoy's movement wasn't a flash of anger. It was a sustained, organized rebellion. Thousands of Boholanos joined him, forming an independent community in the mountains that resisted Spanish control for generations. Second, guerrilla warfare and resilience. The rebels used the rebels used the terrain to their advantage, employing ambushes and strategic retreats. Their knowledge of caves, rivers, and hills made them nearly untouchable. So, ang guerrilla warfare and resilience. So, since bihasa sila sa kagubatan, the terrain, so gigamit na nila as their advantage. So gina-ambush nila ang mga Spanish, ginagamit nila ang kagubatan, ang mga caves, ang rivers for their advantage, to their advantage as their strategic retreats. And at tungod sa kagubatan, they're nearly untouchable. Okay? And the symbol also of endurance, the core themes of the Gohoy Rebellion, the symbol of endurance, because these revolts lasted 85 years old. Okay? So the rebellion lasted until August 31, 1829, when the Spanish finally subdued the movement. By then, over 19,000 rebels had surrendered and the Gohoy had become a legend. And why the Goho revolt matters. First is the spiritual justice. Okay, the Goho's revolt began with spiritual wound and became a fight for dignity, autonomy, and ancestral pride. Second, legacy of leadership. He didn't just lead a rebellion; he built a society. His name, the Gohoy, comes from the Dagon amulet, and Huyuhoy, which is the gentle breeze, symbolizing mystical strength and quiet power. Mo na siya, dili siya basta-basta ihang name. Next is cultural memory. So today, the Gohoy is honored in monuments, textbooks, and the hearts of Boholanos. History reminds us that resistance can be rooted in love, grief, and community. So the Guhoy didn't just fight, he endured. His rebellion was village that refused to kneel. Okay. Grabe ka, courageous ni Daguhoy. He refused to kneel, di ba? So despite of Spanish control, Filipinos across the islands resisted colonizations through localized revolts. These uprisings were often led by datus, babaylans, and local leaders defending land, culture, and autonomy. Revolts were sparked by abuses in tribute collection, forced labor or puloy servicio, religious impositions, and loss of ancestral rights. So the reason of the revolt of the Filipinos is by the abuses in tribute collection, the forced labor, religious imposition, and the loss of ancestral rights. So most revolts were suppressed, but they revealed a deep desire for freedom and laid the emotional groundwork for future revolutions. Now we are down to the galleon trade and global connections. So from 1565 to 1815, the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade linked the Philippines to Mexico and Spain. And the goods like silk, spices, and porcelain flowed through Manila, enriching Spain but limiting local economic growth. Okay, so ang mga spices, ang silk, ang porcelain flowed Manila, enriching the Spain. Pero it was limiting the local economic growth. Filipino artisans and farmers were often exploited while Spanish elite profited. Okay. So, ang mga Filipino farmers, gina-exploit ang ilahang mga product, while ang mga Spanish elites, dako kayo og benefits. The Manila-Acapulco galleon trade connected the Philippines to Mexico and Spain, creating a global trade route across the Pacific. It lasted for 250 years, making Manila a key hub in international commerce. So, ang key hub or the center of international commerce is the Manila. Filipinos traded local goods like abaca, gold, and spices in exchange for Mexican silver, European textiles, and Chinese porcelain. The trade enriched Spanish officials but offered limited benefits to ordinary Filipinos. Despite of exploitation, it introduced new ideas, goods, and cultural exchange that shapes Filipino identity. So, ang trading system, so ang mga products locally in the Philippines, gina-exchange na siya into in international country. However, gamay lang siya. And we are now in the rise of Filipino identity and reform movement, which is happened in 1800s. Education expanded and a new class of ilustrados, which is educated Filipinos. So, ang educated Filipinos that is called ilustrados emerged. The propaganda movement called reforms. So Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Haina used writing to expose abuses. So sila, si Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Haina, they used the writing as a medium to expose the abuses of the Spanish. Rizal's novels, which is the Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, this is the time they awakened national consciousness. Okay? So Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, mo na siya ang movement ni Jose Rizal to shows Filipinos the abuses of the Spanish. And this is the start of the Filipinos awakened to national consciousness. The Katipunan, which is led by Andres Bonifacio, sought independence through armed revolution. So si Jose Rizal, through the um, writing um, revolution. Okay? Nagsulat si Jose Rizal to expose Spanish abuses. However, si Bonifacio, this is armed revolution. Okay? So kung si Jose Rizal a quiet revolution, si Andres Bonifacio this is armed revolution. So kumbaga, ang gusto ni Andres Bonifacio is makigpatay gyud siya. Okay? Makigyera gyud siya. Si Jose Rizal patago pahilom si naman si Andres Bonifacio kuan gyud siya kanang kumbaga vocal action gyud siya action. And the 1800s saw the emergence of a Filipino consciousness, a growing awareness of shared identity, history, and injustice under Spanish rule. So educated Filipinos known as the Ilustrados studied abroad and returned with reformist ideas. Reform movements called the equal rights, representation, and education, not yet independence. Key figures like Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Haina used writing and journalism to awaken the masses. Publications like La Solidaridad and novels like Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo exposed colonial abuses and inspired unity. And the Philippine Revolution and end of Spanish rule, year 1896 to 1898. So the Philippine Revolution began in 1896 and sparked by Katipunan's call for freedom. Emilio Aguinaldo emerged as a revolutionary leader, declaring independence on June 12, 1898. Spain surrendered after the Battle of Manila and the Treaty of Paris, which is December 1898, ceded the Philippines to the United States and ending the Spanish rule. So na-end ang Spanish rule sa pag-abot sa mga Amerikano, which is in United States. Okay? And in 1896, the Katipunan, which is led by Andres Bonifacio, launched a nationwide revolution against Spanish colonial rule. The movement was fueled by decades of oppression, inspired by reformist writings, and driven by a desire for independence. And then Emilio Aguinaldo emerged as a key leader, eventually declaring Philippine independence on June 12, 1898 in Kawit, Cavite. The revolution awakened Spanish control, but the Treaty of Paris, which is in year 1898, ended Spanish rule by transferring the Philippines to the United States, marking a bittersweet victory. So, the Treaty of Paris, which is gitransfer ang Pilipinas sa mga Amerikano, which is marking a bittersweet victory. And the village, and the legacy of the Spanish era. Spanish colonization lasted over 300 years, leaving deep marks in Filipino culture, governance, religion, and language. Roman Catholicism became the dominant faith in reshaping values, festivals, and family life. Spanish introduced centralized governance, which influenced today's political structures. The Spanish language enriched Filipino vocabulary, especially in law, religion, and daily life. Architecture, cuisine, and costumes reflect a blend of indigenous and Hispanic influences. Despite oppressions, Filipinos adapted, resisted, and redefined their identity, turning colonial scars into cultural strength. Okay, so even up until today, daghan kayo og kanang mga um, mga legacy ang Spanish sa Philippines, especially in the architecture, cuisine, costume, and architecture, cuisine, and even though sa mga ano gani sa mga pananalita, let's say for example, the uno dos tres gikan na sa Espanyol. So daghan kayo og impact or dako kayo pud og impact ang Spanish sa sa dako po kayo impact ang Spanish sa Filipino, especially the Catholicism, Roman Catholicism kay gikan gid na sa Spanish. So this is the legacy of the Spanish era. So first is the religion. Impact is Roman Catholicism became deeply rooted in the Filipino culture and even up until today. Language, thousands of Spanish words entered into Filipino languages. And then architecture, the churches, forts, the plazas reflect the Spanish design. Education, schools and university were established. Social structure, this is class divisions, which is Indios, Mestizos, Peninsulares, which is influenced society. And the resistance, revolts and reform movements laid the foundations for independence. So the Spanish era was a time of contradiction, oppression and awakening, conversion and resistance, colonizations and identity formation. It shaped the Filipino soul with both scars and strength. So grabe og learnings nahatag during the Spanish era in the Philippine history. Okay, so that would be it. Thank you so much for watching. For more reviewers like this, please do like and subscribe to support my channel. And if you would like to check for or look for other materials, there's a lot of materials already uploaded in my channel. So feel free to check. So thank you so much for watching. See you next time. And I will be preparing the part 2 questionnaire with answers and generalization. So see you in a bit.